right. So today's episode of All or Nothing, Nicole and I, we're both going to get really vulnerable with you, and we're going to share with you our testimony. And I think testimonies are really important in a lot of people's lives because it gives us all hope. It lets us know like we're not alone in this journey and that God has big things, planned for us. And so we're hoping that this channel will be a channel of vulnerability, that we can just like really open up to you who we are and be vulnerable, and through that grow through Christ, through each other. And so we're going to share with you really what the Lord has done to us and some really big things that he moved in our hearts. Now we're all going to have different testimonies. There are some people who have such deep wounds that God has healed. And then there's other people who it might not seem like a big wound, but it is to that person. Mm-hmm. And so we all have very different everybody has a testimony. Everybody. If you're here listening, you are curious about God, and God is working through you and in you and will for the rest of your life. So there are many different things like in my life that different, peaks and valleys, but there's one spot in my life that I really think of, like when I turned even fully towards God, and like it just like showed me the path of like who I was as a daughter of God. And so I'm going to share that with you later. But right now, Nicole, how are you doing? Are you ready to share with us?
I think so. Hello, world. Yeah. Thank you, Heather. Things are going well. Happy Lent to everyone. As when you get this, you'll be the first week of Lent or so. And I just pray that your Lenten journey is going really well. So I just want to share a little bit about my faith journey. I grew up in a Catholic home where I had really loving parents who were very devout. They weren't always that way. They ended up having more of a conversion experience when I was little. So I've always remembered going to Mass on Sundays and truly never having a choice not to go, even as I got older. My dad was in the RCMP, which is the Canadian police force in Canada. And so we moved every 4 years, and that was very, very hard on me. We didn't have a choice, and some kids adjust better than others, but I was actually quite shy, where people would probably not believe me, but I was. And it took me about a year to make really good friends every time I moved. And then we had to leave. And so I just never really had that stability in our family and in my school, because I knew we had to go. So that has ended up being a blessing now. And God uses all things for his good. It was very difficult as a child to be uprooted all the time. But now I really see like I can live anywhere, and the Lord can put me at any place in the world, and I can really adjust quickly. And so that's the upside of all this. Um, when I was about 8 or 9 years old, I had an experience with the love of Mary that was very profound for me. I kind of forgotten that as my childhood went on, but I knew that she was very important. That was always there, and I remember like saying some Hail Marys, and we'd have a Bible, we had all the sacraments and stuff. When I got into high school, things really started to shift. I was playing competitive sports, particularly volleyball, and was just really struggling with wanting to have freedom. And my dad, being a police officer, was very strict, and rightly so, because he saw things that I didn't know and I didn't understand. And we didn't often communicate well together as a teenager. And I really was struggling with wanting to follow the rules. I was not a bad kid. I never was with like getting into boys and drugs, but I started to drink in high school and deceive my parents about it and lie about where I would be. I wanted to tell the truth so much, but I couldn't, because I knew I wouldn't be able to go anywhere. So I could, but I chose not to at that time. In one breath, I was having a lot of fun in a worldly sense, like with my friends, and just coming out of my shell, and just people like, oh, Nicole, you're so fun. And we thought you're so shy. And so I was sort of getting that kind of attention and affirmation. But what I quickly realized is I would go home after having a few drinks, and I'd read the Bible. And I was just longing for something more in my life. And God was always with me, but I was making choices, but my heart knew, like it was like I was an old soul, that I knew that I was longing for God. And the funny thing was when I would be having a few drinks out at parties, I would always talk to people about Jesus and how much they loved him. He loved them. And they'd be like, oh, Nicole, but yet here I am living like just such a hypocritical life. But there was a longing, and the Lord knew that I was also I think, trying to fit in, trying to be cool, trying to be a part of my volleyball team or whatever. And I have wonderful friends to this day from my volleyball team. And it was, but I found there was a loneliness. And also like, I just want to sort of do a side note. My parents, during this time, as they kind of grew in their faith, they went on a pilgrimage to Yugoslavia at the time, Croatia to Medjugorje, which the church just approved recently. These where Mary was allegedly appearing to these children. And when my parents went there, they had some like experiences of like my dad saw like the miracle of the sun and different things like that. And then when they came back here, they were really on fire. And we started praying as a family after supper. And we would say the triple seven, which was seven Our Father, seven Hail Marys, seven Glory Be. So we did that as a teenagers. And my goodness, we would be fighting and like it would take about 7 minutes, but it was like Satan did not want us to pray. And it would just be the hardest time for our family to sit down and pray. But that I just wanted to throw that in there that we were praying and my parents would always like I remember like taking turns saying prayers with me when I was little, like at bedtime. So there was those things being planted. And then we did something. We would go on Sundays with about 5 other families to a convent. And again, I didn't want to go at the time, but we'd go into the chapel, we'd pray the rosary, and then we'd have teachings on different topics, on scripture, on chastity, like purity. And then we also had one on the pro-life movement. And our whole family and all these families, I was about 14 years old, saw The Silent Scream. Now that's a documentary, and I say this is sort of a part of my sort of where God is taking me, but The Silent Scream was showing an abortion through an ultrasound. And the guy who did the abortion, he didn't realize the humanity of the child till he saw the documentary. He never did another abortion again. But when I saw what happened in the womb and the very graphic experience, something really, an arrow went into my heart that I just never forgot that. And to this day, and then I ended up later on in the pro-life movement. But that was a really turning point of like God planting a seed for ministry later. So all these things were happening in my family and like in my spiritual life, but I was very torn, like with one foot in the world, one foot in the church. And like after a while, it's sort of like I always had the image of being on like two blocks of ice that split. And you're starting to do the splits, and the Lord's like, choose, you need to jump. The turning point for me was my dad had asked if I wanted to go listen to the testimony of Vishka, who is one of the visionaries in Medjugorje. And I didn't really want to go, but I could get out of school and it was like a 2 hour drive away. And I said, okay. So I went. And I remember walking into this big auditorium, or it was like a rink, actually, it was huge. And everyone was so joyful and so peaceful. And I remember saying, I wish I was like that. I want to have what they have. They just had this joy. And even though like I prayed and everything, there was still such a heaviness because I was still living kind of a double life and being really torn about my faith and following God. And as Vishka started to speak, I just remembered that love of Mary, that like this experience I had when I was little, sort of came back. And I knew without a doubt, like that she loved me and that she was my mother, like and our intercessor. And for Protestants who don't understand, we'll talk more about that another time. I just want a little side note that we don't worship her, but we honor her as an intercessor. I just wanted to say that. So she became something really important to me, someone very important to me. My mom, I didn't know what to do after high school. So my mom said, what about Net Ministries, which is National Evangelization Team? I was like, oh, I had done a couple of retreats when I was younger and I loved them. And I ended up getting on to Net USA. And that was a game changer for me where I started learning a lot more about the saints. We prayed together as a team. I started to go to regular daily mass. And God really became a really big deal in my life at that time. And I've never been around young Catholics growing up kind of in rural Canada and Nova Scotia. There wasn't a lot of young adults who were into their faith. So I remember just being amazed at like there's like cool people who are normal, I hate to say, but they were normal and fun and played sports and music and all. And I was like, oh my goodness, I didn't know Catholics like this existed. It was such an example for me. And when I came home, I had changed, and I didn't fit in anymore with my same friend group the same way that I did before. And that was really difficult for me because I still love them. I'm not judging anyone, but I was just like, how can I live my faith? I don't really want to get back into some of the things I was doing. That became hard, and the loneliness sort of continued. But after that, I ended up moving to Ottawa, which the Companions of the Cross were there. and there's a lot of young adults, people who did net. And I kind of found some really like lifelong friends there as well. And since then, without going into too much, because they could be other episodes, no doubt, but I started full-time ministry in the pro-life movement. I was a full-time youth minister in Denver, Colorado for a year. Then I did the 40 Days for Life. I felt called to lead that in Canada. So I started that in Toronto. And then after a while, I had a little bit of burnout with the pro-life movement because I was on the sidewalk. And I just want to sort of just say, if you've ever been through an abortion experience, that you are deeply loved by God and He is so merciful. And please don't keep that a secret. And if you're Catholic, I'd recommend just going to confession and talking to someone. And again, that's a whole other topic. But I want to say that you are loved, and I don't judge you, and we don't judge you. God knows your heart, but there is forgiveness and repentance and mercy. So I just wanted to say that. But after a while, I just needed to change. I was getting a little burnt out with all the heaviness of what I was seeing. So I became a teacher. And then I got into chaplaincy and teaching religion. And I moved to Alberta and Canada. And yeah, I've been doing that for the last 12 years. And this year, I just felt like the Lord wanted me. I got married. I feel bad. I didn't say that in my first episode. I am married to a man named Jeff. And that was very painful for me as well, which was waiting. So any of you who are still single who are waiting for their future spouse, I was in my very late 30s before I got married. And that was a cross. All my friends were getting married, all having children. And I was very happy for them, but but I was like, what about me? And if anyone feels like, what about me? In many things. And then I couldn't have my own children, biological children, and all those things. So there was like these crosses that still exist. And I had to grieve. But through all that, the Lord, it was able to use me in ministry, and which I wouldn't have been able to do. So here I am now taking the year off. I'm just substitute teaching. I'm doing this podcast with Heather that she's so graciously asked me to help her with, and just seeing what's next on the journey. But daily mass adoration is very important to me. I'm working on like inner healing of things that are still wounds from my childhood, and moving forward. I'm still realize there's a lot of work to be done and we never fully arrive, but I'm committed to sort of giving God permission to be the divine physician and to heal my soul and my emotions over life that's hard. So that's just sort of me in a bit of a nutshell. Mary has become very big to me as well, and the saints. So much more to share there, but I just want to give you an understanding of who I am. And the reason why is that sometimes people jump onto a Catholic podcast and like, all these people live perfect lives. They're probably, little holy angels and never had, but like we've all had our struggles and some very dark times in my life where I felt that God wasn't there. And there's times where He's still very quiet. And actually, the majority of the time, He's very quiet with me. I trust that He's there, but it's not about feelings. Again, with forgiveness, same thing. But it's knowing that He's there, and that's what faith is. It's not about seeing. It's just the trust and having faith. So, yeah, that's sort of it in a nutshell, Heather. What about you?
That is such a beautiful testimony. There was a lot of that I didn't know. So it was really very interesting to hear you say that, because I don't know if you know this, but my mom had a big conversion as well through kind of Medjugorje. Her friends did. So yeah, I'll share my testimony. So mine actually does have to do with my family as well. So my mom was a little bit of a rebel in high school, and then she was going to marry my dad, and she had this huge conversion. And so I'm so thankful for that, because of her conversion, I was brought up Catholic, and she was learning the faith, and she was teaching me the faith as she was learning, because she was so excited about it. And I just like, I think about that and I'm like, what a blessing that like she shared that with me. So first of all, my parents are divorced. They divorced when I was about 4 years old. And so I was pretty little. That kind of rocks your world, when you're 4 years old. I think about little Maria, and she's 4, and I'm like, I can't even fathom how she would do with her parents divorcing. And so my mom and dad got an annulment, and my mom just really clung to her faith, and she found this wonderful group of women who she's still friends with today, and they really helped foster her faith. She met them at the Catholic Church, and they lived in our townhouses, and we just like, they're like best friends today. It's amazing. But they went through the journey kind of together. And so it was really neat. So anyway, so my mom got really into the saints and reading about the saints. And so she would tell me stories of like the amazing things that these saints would do and how they lived their life. And I would start reading books about them when I was little. And I just remember being in like fourth grade and being like, I want to be a saint. Like I knew that I wanted to be a saint. And I know that that's pretty rare, but I thank my mom, because if she didn't like teach me that, I would never have thought I wanted to be a saint, you know? So that's why I think with my YouTube channel, like I try to let women, moms know that, like, teach your children the faith, because that will help them in this world, whether, you know, they continue Catholicism or not, like leaning on Christ and, you know, learning about the saints and the wonderful parts of our wonderful tradition. So anyway, so my mom remarried, and she remarried the most amazing man, like saintly man. Like everyone says that they meet my dad and he's amazing. Even though he was amazing and wonderful, I still, of course, wanted my dad. You know, like there's a part of me that always, you know, you want your real father. And, you know, I'm honestly like my mom and dad and my stepdad, like they all got along so well. They really did. Like we'd go to birthday parties and they were always sitting together, drinking a beer, laughing, you know. And so you would think like, okay, then that's all it takes. Like, you know, they all get along. Like nobody was mean. It was like they had nothing but the nicest things to say about each other. And so you would think like that would not, like a divorce would not affect me, but it does. Like to the core of you, you still know that like you're like the two parents are supposed to be there for each other. With that came a lot of insecurities actually about myself and, you know, my worth. And, you know, I still struggle with that today, like my worth. I grew up, you know, and I was one of those kids who thought I was so cool and I wanted to be an actress. And you know, I like was a very normal kid in a lot of ways. In another sense, like my mom and her friends like started to get into Medjugorje and like tell stories of miracles that had happened, and they started praying the rosary. And so my mom would pray the like full rosary every day, and she would ask me if I would pray, and so I would pray with her because I just adored my mom. I just thought she was so wonderful and the best thing ever. She could do no wrong in my eyes. And that was all through high school, actually. I was not a normal teenager, but I would pray the rosary with her. And she never went to Medjugorje, but all of her friends would. And they would come back and tell stories. And it was just a really neat thing. I remember all the moms would sit around, and they all had like 10 kids, you know, they had lots of kids, and they'd be running. All the normal kids were running around, and I was sitting at the table just like waiting to hear about like the next miracle. Like I was just like so hungry to know about, you know, what Mother Mary did, or of course it was God, but like it was just like, it was neat, you know. And I know that that's a very rare thing to grow up in and stuff. But then like, you know, I went through high school and I felt very lonely. I felt like I didn't have any friends. Like I had a lot of acquaintances, but you know, a lot of people at my school, they drank, they, you know, smoked pot, they, you know, had sex outside of marriage, all the things that I knew I didn't want to do. Now, if they would have asked me, I truly believe I would have said yes, you know, because I wanted to belong. And Mother Mary did reveal to me much later on in my life, like when I was in my 20s, she told me the reason you were never invited to any of those parties, because they were like my friends, but not like strong friends. She said was because you prayed so many rosaries when you were younger. Like I protected you from that. And I was just like, wow. Because at the time it was so painful that nobody invited me. Like I'm all alone, you know, and stuff. So anyway, so then I went on a retreat. It's called U2000. I don't know if they still have them, but it's by the CFR brothers and sisters. It's all like ours was in a huge gym. And for 3 days, they had talks and they would sing praise and worship, but it was all around the Eucharist. Like the Eucharist was there the entire time. And and the Eucharist, so that's the body of Christ. And so it was in the middle of this gym. And I just remember that God revealed to me, because I was sad about my dad, that I didn't know my real dad, and like that there was something off. And God revealed to me, God the Father revealed to my heart, not like audibly, like where I could hear him, but he said, Heather, I am your father. Like, I love you perfectly the way that no father could possibly love you. You are never alone, and I am your father.
Mm.
And that just like, it like pierced me. I was like, oh my goodness, I am loved. Like, it was the first time where I just felt this unconditional love. Like, no matter, if I wasn't smart enough or pretty enough, or, all these things, that God the Father would love me. Whereas like my other father never really came to see me. He never like put really any effort into it. And so I, of course, thought, okay, maybe if I get better grades, maybe if I'm nicer, maybe if I'm funnier, maybe, all these things. Like, I was slowly trying to figure out how to be the daughter he wanted, so he would want a relationship with me. And he never really did until I got married much later on. And then he was very interested in me. Like, he loves my husband a lot. My husband's amazing, but he like really was proud of like who I married and stuff. So it was the first time where I just like felt this unconditional love, and that I was enough. And that was something that, thanks be to God, never went away. Like, and it's just something that I'm like, I wish everybody could feel and know how loved they are. And the fact that I got to know that at such a young age is such a gift. And that's why I'm just like, I want everybody to have that gift, because if we knew how much we were loved by God, nothing else would matter. It really wouldn't matter how smart we are, how successful, or, all the things, because God is just like immersed in love with us. And I notice too, like when I have children, there is a part of me that I'm like, I can connect with God the Father a little bit more, because I understand that unconditional love, right? Like, my kids might do something wrong, lie about something, and like they feel so ashamed and so embarrassed, and they're like, do you still love me, mom? And I'm like, oh my goodness, I will always love you. I just like, and I'm like, that is how God feels with us. Like, he just wants like there to be confession, so that we can like fully be in union with him. Like, it's all for our benefit. Like, everything, he poured out his whole everything for us. He created the universe for us. He gave us his only son for us. Like that, like if we were the only one worth dying for, he would do it again. And like, if you really think about that, it is mind blowing. And why live for anything else other than God? Like, he loves us so much more than our parents possibly could, because they are flawed and they're human and they're wonderful. Like, my parents are wonderful, but like nothing compared to what God is. So that's my testimony. And kind of the same as Nicole, like I got married in my 30s, which was painful because I wanted to get married right out of high school. I'm like ready to meet my husband and have 12 babies. And he didn't come till, we got married when I was 30. And that was like my 20s were painful. I did a lot of fun things. I did a lot of ministry. I did net ministries, actually. Nicole, I think, introduced me to it, and I loved it. A lot of growth there. It's beautiful. You get to meet so many other Catholics who are just on fire for God. And Nicole and I met at CYC camp, which is Catholic youth camp in Minnesota, and that I had a deeper conversion to, like just seeing other people who are into their faith. And I did that for 3 summers because I was like, this is amazing, just other people who love God, because I felt so alone when I went to high school. It is neat how, there's a lot of peaks and valleys within our life, and God loves us all so much. And it's neat when you actually, that clicks within us, like, oh, I really don't need to worry about, whatever the world is worrying about, because I'm his. Like, he's going to take care of me more than I would take care of my own children. So it's pretty amazing. So that's kind of my testimony. I am happily married, and we've got 5 kids, and it's a messy life still, and there's still so much that I'm learning about myself, and in marriage is tough, but it is so good. I see the growth in myself because of marriage, and I think that that's the whole point of marriage, is to help both of us get each other to heaven, which is hard. And you think about like all the pain that all the hard parts of our life is what makes our testimony, like you have to think about that. Like, everybody's going to have suffering and pain. You could do it with or without God, but when we bring God into it, there's a grace that goes with it, and he can touch our hearts in such a soft, gentle way and stuff. So anyway, so that is my testimony. And
Oh, that's awesome. Heather, thank you for sharing that because I am, before we started recording, we were talking about that. Like, just there's such a father wound, like in our society,
yeah.
the lack of fatherhood, and it really has an impact. And I just, yeah, I'm so glad that you had that experience with God. But it does, like, I think there's always scars on our hearts. Like, even with God's love and healing, there's always that, it's like it wasn't supposed to be that way. You were supposed to have a loving dad in your life that was supposed to like bring that to you, and so there's always going to be that like scar there, but also God can use it. Like, even just you sharing today, some of the listeners will be able to completely relate to that story, just that not having a dad, and but you like, having God as your father, to being able to like kind of put a healing balm on your wound is just, it's beautiful, and to know his love, so yeah, it's funny when you were sharing that because I didn't really share that part, but my dad and were very similar in so many ways. And my dad um, taught, like, really was very passionate about the faith, and he had such authority in my life that if my dad said the sky was like, purple and with yellow polka dots, I would have believed it, even though I'm looking at it. But whatever dad said, he was so convicted with the faith. So,
Yeah.
and then my mom was really lived it. But my dad and I started to battle a lot because my brother was pretty easygoing, and then I kind of blew through and wanted to do things, but to the point where I ended up, dad asked me to leave for a weekend, and because I didn't want to follow the rules, and I'm like, oh, see you later. Yeah, and I got my
Oh,
my
wow.
bag and I was walking now, but meanwhile I'm like, what am I doing? And I camped out in my friend's backyard, devastated. And I remember meeting my mom at Mass on the Sunday, and I brought my bag, really hoping to invite me home, but my pride was like, it was only for a couple of days, but I went to Mass, and mom's like, you should, do you want to come home? And I was trying to play it tough, and I'm like, oh, I don't know. Like, dad probably wouldn't even want me to come home. He's like, no, I think he would, Nicole. So I walked in, dad didn't know I was there. I walked in the front of the door, and I hear dad say to mom, can you call Nicole to see if she was ready to come home? And I remember I kind of walked around the corner and like, hi, Dad. He got really emotional. And and I did too. And I just was like, he's like, I love you. You gotta follow the rules, Nicole. And I was like, yeah. And I was just so happy to be home. But it was just sort of like, and it's hard as a parent. But anyway, we had those battles because I was really trying, I was a really good kid. But my dad also had a lot of very valid reasons for wanting to protect me, but I didn't understand. And I wanted to do stuff with my friends. But I had a bit of a father wound during in that whole sense of my teenage years, which the Lord has completely healed. And there's been total forgiveness on both sides. And my parents are very devout Catholics and daily mass goers and have been a huge example to me. And my mom is a very, very saintly woman in many ways. Shout out, mom, where, she just would always sacrifice and teach us. She would always give up her chair or serve herself last. And so my mom really lived, she had and still does have a servant's heart. My mom really lived it. Not that dad didn't, but dad was like kind of the teacher, the authority, and mom was really the heart of the home, and just, yeah, a beautiful gift. So, but I really thank you for sharing that because I think that a lot of people will be able to relate to a divorce and the wounds of divorce and
Yeah.
healing and that journey. Yeah.
And thank you for sharing too about your dad, because being a parent, it's so hard sometimes to be strict with our kids, but that is like you both like grew so much. You probably grew so much from that. And I feel like God feels the same way. Like he's like, I don't want to have to punish you. I don't want to have to like do
Discipline.
this, but this
Yeah.
is like what will help you to grow and understand, and so I think that is such a great thing that your dad did that, because that's a story you'll remember forever, and that is what love is. It is disciplining our kids. It is, doing the hard things even though we don't want to and
Yeah.
stuff. So it
And
is, it's a godly trait to have.
yeah. Because our society, and then I'll wrap this up, but the society kind of has Jesus as like the kumbaya Jesus, where it's like, whatever, everything, God is love, and he is. But it's like people think that you can live the way you want, and there's no consequence, there's no, just that,
Yeah.
Jesus is
Don't
just,
forgive me.
yeah, I just do whatever. And God, and he does love us right where we are, but he loves us too much to keep us there, and he wants us to grow. So it's like, so sometimes he, like you say, he allows hard things in our life. Not, he doesn't always will things, that some things are sinful. Like you're in a perfect world, your dad was supposed to be a part of your family. You're like, divorce isn't supposed to happen, but he will
Yeah.
use those things to help you grow closer to him. He doesn't will it, but he allows it. And
Yeah.
it's, so those are good things. So those, yeah, that's a bit of us in a nutshell. There's lots of topics we could go into, and I think actually marriage is one maybe we'll talk about sometime, and just in general terms, because I think you're right. Like in relationships, it's hard, but so fruitful.
Yeah,
Mhm.
definitely. And it's such a journey to our path to heaven,
Yeah,
like I think some marriages are hard and some are easy, and but the whole point is getting each other to heaven.
yeah,
And I think most of us probably have a little bit harder marriage for a reason. Like
yes,
God wants us not to just stay where we are, but to be challenged. And our spouse is going to challenge us. So it's good.
yes,
It's hard sometimes, but it's good. All right. Well, I think we'll wrap it up here.
yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us. Is there anything you want to share for your favorites for this week?
One of the things this week that was kind of fun was there was an impersonator of Michael Jackson who is from South Africa, and he's touring like all over New Zealand, Canada, US. And Jeff got us tickets to that, and it was amazing. Just like the dancing, the singing, he sounded just like Michael Jackson. And Michael Jackson was obviously someone who was on the radio all the time. When I was a kid. So that was probably the one fun thing well, many fun things, but that was one thing that I really enjoyed this last week. What about you, Heather?
So it's called the sacrifice for Jesus jar. And so you take like dried beans and you put it in a jar. And so for every sacrifice you do or good deed that you do, you're not supposed to tell anybody, but you put a bean in. And then on Easter morning, they will turn them into jelly beans, and the kids know it's me and everything. But it's great
Wow.
because my kids are at that age where they're super motivated, and like they are just like want to do these things that they have to use their senses and stuff. So it's fun to like be a mom and have these little things that hopefully become traditions. This is our first year doing this, but
I
the
love
kids are
it.
super pumped about it. And yeah.
And like jelly beans. Yeah,
Yeah.
again.
Oh. Yeah, we did something similar. It's called the Giving Manger.
Oh,
And so you put like straw down for Jesus, and then like at Christmas he's in the soft bed. So it's
oh,
like yarn you're putting down. So and my kids loved it. So this is a very similar to that. All right. Well, we'll end it there. Thank you so much for joining us. And until next time, we'll see you guys all later. Bye.
hi.